No
open it
problem
up.
at all.
All right. Would you like a first question? Or would you like to, actually, it would be a great idea to introduce ourselves. Hey everyone, my name is Natalie Louie. I am from the INTERalliance Leadership Council. I work on the newsletter and content management team, and it's a really great time. I really recommend any of you interested in joining to go to interalliance.org and just sign up underneath programs ILC. Matt can definitely say that ILC is great. And
ILC is great. I can mirror that.
Yes, thank you very much. Would you like to introduce yourself, Matt?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So my name is Matt Godsted. I am a Director of Enterprise Security at 8451. For those that don't, I can talk a little bit about 8451. Not everyone knows what that is. It's a complicated set of numbers. But we are actually a subsidiary of the Kroger company. So that we handle data analytics, data science for Kroger. So for those that shop at Kroger, you'll know that you may know that you have a loyalty card, a Loyalty Plus card that you use. And so we're responsible for a lot of the work that we do is making sure that when you receive marketing and targeted coupons and the like, that is done by 8451. We're the ones that make sure it's more of a personalized shopping experience. So what we do is data. So our 100% of our business is data, which makes security that much more of an important role within the organization. I've been at 8451 a little over a year now, and I'm also part of the INTERalliance Board of Directors. I'm co-chair, along with my counterpart, Jenny Walker from GE is the other co-chair, and have been involved with the INTERalliance since 2012, so just about 8 years.
All right, thank you very much, Matt. If you guys have any questions for Matt, you can just type them in the chat. Right now, we're going to start off with a great question relating to data science or data security. It's asking, what could a high school student do to help them prepare for a career in data security? What could they study?
So that's a good question. That's the nice thing, I think, about security is, first of all, it's all around us. It's day to day. And I was my background, my initial background was not security at all. I had a focus on infrastructure for around about 15 years. I worked at Kroger Technology for 10 years, supporting infrastructure, which was servers and storage and that sort of thing. And as I worked through my career, what I found is that really any aspect of IT would lend itself to being able to properly, you could have a career in security if you understand the area. So if you have a background in database as a DBA, if you have background in application development, you're going to learn some skills that support security. So, for example, if you're if you're getting into the DBA front, you're going to learn how to lock databases down. You're going to learn how to properly do things. So that's kind of a nice thing is as security, you can really have a disciplined background in anything, and you can work your way into the security side. In high school, though, in order to get prepared for that, a lot of what I would just say is pay attention to the news. Unfortunately, the last 3 months, the news has pretty much been saturated with the coronavirus and a lot of things from the political front. But what you can find there's a lot of resources out there where you can see what's happening with companies and security and data breaches. I would look into that stuff. I would find out what are some of the common things, the common mistakes that companies make when they experience a security breach of some kind or a data breach. What did they do? How did they respond? How did they react? What was it that caused it to begin with? There's a wealth of information out there that you can learn and become more versed in information security just by looking and seeing what's around you. So that would be the first thing I would say. That'd be a great way to get started with it. And then secondly, just there's a wealth of information out there free online tools. If you want to learn, if you're into development, there's a lot of, you could utilize Python. You could start looking at just a lot of the common tools that are going to be, regardless of the company you work for, that are going to be tools that organizations would have to protect the perimeter and for monitoring. But I would personally would say right out of the gate, I just focus on some of the things that are happening in the news and learn from that stuff.
Speaking about that, well, it's a little more beforehand, but even though you worked for a little over a year at 8451, is there a solution that caused more problems than you thought it would?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So probably the solution, I would say, and I'm going to speak a little generally. Well, if I can think of an example, I will. But I would say that probably what would cause more problems in the long run would be the solutions that are overly complex. The projects that I've been involved with in the years that I've been in IT, the ones that have been the most problematic for our organizations have always been the ones that were way over designed and they're way overly complex. And there's a multitude of reasons why that could happen. A lot of times it's the influence of the person that's designing it. A lot of times it's just that you have the tools that you have to work with or budget. But many times the examples that come to mind are the ones where that were most problematic were the ones that were overly complex and way over designed. The more difficult it is, the more complex its design, the harder it's going to be for an organization, for an IT team to support. Generally, I would say most companies, the person that designs it is not going to be the same person that builds it. And the person that builds it is more than likely not going to be the one that has to support it. And if it's over designed and too complex, it's going to be very, very hard for that IT organization to support it if it's too complex. What happens and then is that the person that builds it also ends up being the one to support it. Much more difficult to cross-train people to take that on. So that person is going to own it probably for the rest of their career there. And it becomes a risk to an organization when that happens. So long story, there's some, we had some when I was at Kroger. I don't want to throw out what the solution was, but we had one that was built that it did the job, but it was too complex for most people to support. The one person that knew it the best, they were the ones that ended up supporting it, and they didn't really have much of a life because they were always the ones that were called in to deal with it. So my advice then would be, if you're at a company, you're at a job, and you're involved in a project, always just kind of stick as basic and out of the box is always going to be your best guidance. Make it as easy as possible when you design solutions, knowing that someone's going to have to support it right after you. The term that we like to use is stick to as out of the box as you can, and those are going to be the least problematic in my opinion.
That was really in depth. Thanks so much for that answer, and thank you to whoever in the crowd gave out that question. That was a really good question.
It was a good question. Yeah.
Since you spoke about people should have a life, what do you think is a really common trait that people should have when working in data security?
I think the ability, when in security, you really have to, and there's a lot of different aspects with security. Our team is small at 8451, but we have two different branches. We have our governance side, and we have our security solutions side. And the security solutions side are the ones that handle the day-to-day activity. They're watching threats. They're monitoring our perimeter. They're making sure nothing looks out of sorts, and they're reporting on things, and they're following up and researching. And then we have the governance side, and we're the ones that work with the business, and we're the ones that analyze data that's going out, and we're looking at it from an overall, how do we protect our data strategy and architecture. One trait, though, I think it's just always going to be the slowing down, making sure you really understand the systems that are in play, understand just having a really broad sense of the business always helps in security, regardless of where you're going to be. And that's probably true for IT in general, but I would say having a really solid understanding of the business. I mean, understanding what's happening in the world and threats, that's good. There's a lot of great tools that assist with that, but I will always go back and say that having a really solid understanding of your business and what you do is going to be your absolute best tool in allowing you to have a great career in security wherever you're working.
Yeah. Speaking of tools, we have a question in the chat from Forrest asking, what tools would you recommend for someone who wants to self-learn cybersecurity or any other business aspects in data security too?
The question was, what tools to learn cybersecurity?
Yes.
Okay. Free wise, I would suspect that's probably where you want to go. Find an area within cybersecurity that you're interested in. As I mentioned, there's many different areas. So off the top of my head, let me think about something that you could potentially use. But there's so many free tools at your disposal. Just going out onto the internet and searching and finding some really, really great resources and great blogs. Off the top of my head, I can't think of any tool specifically that would one could download and utilize. I know Python is a really strong tool. I don't do day in day out with those type of development tools or type of security tools, so I can't really answer that. But I will say that you can usually find anything if you kind of hone in on where you're thinking about. You want to focus on in security, and you'll be able to find a multitude of tools.
All right. Yeah, online, I know there are a lot of free code camp exists a lot on YouTube. I really recommend that. Not just to learn Python, but for any other like SQL or database like learning, so you can learn how to protect it of sorts. Yeah. Honestly, from a lot of other professionals, they've said just go online and look up how to learn cybersecurity. Yeah, I wish you luck finding some tools for us. Maybe you can share some with us. All right. We also have another question from Zach Sargent here, asking, what do you think about CTF? Does the knowledge transfer to the real world? I don't know about you, but I do not know what CTFs are. Can you give a quick explanation as to what they are? If you know them.
I would say he's talking capture the flag. I'm assuming that's what that's referring to.
Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, Zach said yeah.
Okay. So capture the flags. Those are they absolutely transfer to the real world. I remember Tech Olympics probably 3 years ago. We had one of our board members works at Western and Southern. Sean McMillan. Some of those on the call may know Sean, but Sean set up for Tech Olympics a 2-hour capture the flag workshop where we had skill sets of all varieties that were in that workshop. He had some students from high school that had a pretty strong understanding of cybersecurity, knew a lot of the tools. And then he had a fair number of students in that workshop that hadn't ever done it before, but it just sounded kind of cool. And by the end of that exercise, he was able to work with a SaaS solution that had a whole lab set up where students could come in and do a pretty effective capture the flag competition. And at the end of those 2 hours, even the students that really didn't have this is their first time doing that. There was a lot of tools that they hadn't been exposed to beforehand. Even by the end of that 2 hours, even the ones that had the least amount of experience had probably captured one, if not two, of the flags. It's a good simulation of the real world. It's a good simulation of getting to the web layer and seeing if you can get through that web layer, getting into the application server and knowing where the crown jewel data is. And that's pretty reflective of what happens in the real world. I have seen live world examples of ethical hackers where they have breached security, just picking a store, and then they were able to breach the security within 30 or 40 minutes. And the concepts that person used to be able to do that were very, very similar to capture the flag. So I think that if you are interested in a career as a hacker, ethical hacker, it's a very, very valuable concept. It also helps you that from a security standpoint, knowing what layers of your security to protect. When we kind of harp on system and platform owners about keeping up to date with patches, and that's exactly what hackers utilize. Is they're exploiting older operating systems and older versions of software. So I think that CTFs are very, very valid, and I think they very much translate into the real world.
All right, that's really interesting. Oh, yeah, Zach says thanks. We have another question from Forrest. So he asks, speaking of Python, has it replaced Perl? Again, I don't exactly understand what Perl is. If it's like a coding language? I think he's asking if Python's taking up most of the coding world at this point. Can you answer that?
I will give you a very, very broad answer. That's not in my background.
All right.
I mean, I say for one of the little bit that I do know is, I mean, could it replace Perl? Yeah, and I think that it can. They're both scripting languages. They're available, if not on all platforms. If there's a benefit of which one would you go to, I don't really know that for sure, but it could replace it if there was and usually when you look at replacing something, you have to come up with a business reason to do so. But from my understanding, yes, it could replace Perl if you were so inclined.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for asking the question, Forrest. So here's a question from the form that everyone filled out. It asks, what's the most interesting project that you've worked on? Or perhaps the most successful project you've worked on?
There's a lot. There's many different things come to mind at the moment.
You can pick the top.
Let me talk about one that we're actually still in the middle of. And not just because it's the latest, it's the newest one that comes to mind, but I truly would put it at the top of one of the more interesting things I've worked on. So everyone is aware of the coronavirus that's happening right now. As part of Kroger, we are tasked with, I'm part of the overall pandemic task force for Kroger, as well as for 8451. And this task force was established probably very late February once we understood that the virus had cropped up in the United States. As soon as that very first case was found in the U.S. on the West Coast, we established task forces at both the Kroger level as well as the 8451 level. And it's been very interesting because, especially from the Kroger side, and being a part of a task force that spawns the entire company, everything from grocery retail to manufacturing to the fuel centers to human resources and everything you can imagine. Every aspect of the business has been represented on the pandemic task force, and to see how the company has responded, always with the first and foremost, the goal has been how do we keep associates safe? How do we keep customers safe? And how do we meet the demand? Everyone's heard the jokes and seen the memes about the toilet paper stuff and all the shelves being emptied out of what were essential items, turned into the biggest, probably sales, resulted in the biggest sales that Kroger has ever seen because of a lot of panic buying. But just to be part of and to see how this company reacted to this pandemic and done everything it could to meet the needs of customers and in a safe way, and to stay ahead of the virus as best that we could, and to stay ahead of it, and also being the first to come up with a lot of things in our stores to make sure that it's safe for customers. Plastic shields that you see at the registers, that was early on when that was developed and implemented. That was put into place pretty quickly. Keeping the stores stocked when looking for alternative suppliers. And anyway, all these things that we went into, I would label as absolutely the most interesting project, because I got to, for one of the very few times, been able to be part of a project that wasn't really utilizing an infrastructure background or even a security background. I have responsibility I'm one that has responsibility for business continuity for 8451. So that's where I was involved. But just to see how the company responded to customer requests and took care of the communities and took care of customers and associates was definitely one of the more interesting ones that I've been on, and that as of recent, and probably will be for a long time.
That is really amazing. Do you mind going back to your roots a bit and explaining how you got into data security as a job?
So lucked into it. I think a lot of things with IT, at least in my career, I can attribute to being in the right place at the right time. When I left when I left Kroger Technology in 2012, I went to a small nonprofit in downtown called KnowledgeWorks, and much, much smaller nonprofit organization. And because we were smaller, we didn't have as large of an IAT staff as we had at Kroger. At Kroger, everything is very much, you have different responsibilities, but you have more targeted responsibilities for groups and teams. And at KnowledgeWorks, we had a lot of people that had a lot of different, responsible for a lot of different things just because we were smaller. And I was very fortunate that when one of the responsibilities I picked up was security, sorry, phone rang there. One of the things I was responsible for was security. So from that aspect, I was able to learn a lot about it while I did other aspects of my day-to-day job. So learned how to, learned a lot about compliance. I learned a lot about regulatory requirements that we had on the data that we were hosting and protecting and responsible for. Learned about HIPAA, learned about protected information, personal information, and why that's important to protect that. And that helped me to develop those skills while I was also responsible for other things. When I left there and I went to Western and Southern, I had responsibility for our identity and access management. And if getting back to probably an earlier question, when you think about what probably the one core thing, two core things, but one of the core things that is really key to a successful cybersecurity is identity access management. It's knowing what user accounts you have, knowing that knowing that the person is logging in is truly the person logging in. And that goes back, education was going to be the other one I was going to say was a kind of a crucial one for security. But as far as it really as the end user is the one at the end of the day that can most help keep your organization secure. If this were a live forum, I would ask for volunteers to come up with what do you think the one thing a user could do is to ensure that the company isn't infected with malware. Not clicking links and not clicking attachments. But at the root of it, I would say there's a small percentage of actual security breaches that happen from somebody from the outside that just happens to brute force their way in. They're going to use compromised credentials almost every time. And so I really, at Western and Southern, I was able to get a really good background and understanding of the importance of a really good identity access management practice. And that was able to, from that, I was able to really kind of build out from there. And enough so that when I left there to go to 8451, I was able to do security full time, which I love.
All right. Thanks so much for that in-depth background. That's really good to know for anyone who really just wants to get into that kind of career. Oh, in the chat, we're getting some really technical, well, not really technical, but technical type questions. One of them comes from Zach, saying that programming is often portrayed inaccurately in popular media. Are there any popular ideas about your field that you find to be inaccurate?
I'd be interested to know more about Zach, about what you mean by programming is portrayed inaccurately in popular media. Can you, in the chat, maybe can you include a little more detail about that?
It might be alluding to AI, maybe, how in classic AI is going to take over the world. Or honestly, Zach, please explain a little more. But yeah, are there any popular ideas,
To be inaccurate. Yeah, I'm trying to think what's a good example at this point. You mentioned AI, and I think that I'm not sure if that was where he was going with it, but I think that AI is definitely going to be the way of our future. I think that bots and if you go to most websites today, it starts off with artificial intelligence and it's trying to learn your behavior. So a lot of the common tools that we use day to day is learning our behavior. Amazon and Google are learning our behavior, which makes it that much more of a focus from a security standpoint and making sure that we're locking that data down, especially when it comes to identification of people. So there's nothing really comes to mind about what would be popular ideas about security and about inaccuracy. I know it's a field that's going to continue to grow. I know the importance of security is going to continue to grow the more we rely on technology. And data privacy is huge, is absolutely huge right now. And the amount of information that we allow websites and apps to take, most people, very few people actually read the fine print when they download an app, and how much data that's being collected. And I just can't stress that enough, that I think that's just going to continue to be a growing field.
Testing. Can you hear me? Can anybody hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. Hey, thank you. I was more thinking, I appreciate the answer, but I was more thinking, I was watching a show the other day, and in it, the common trope of hackers getting in, and I know you mentioned your perimeter, like making sure there's no people accessing files or whatever inside your system that shouldn't be there. Is that a reality, or
It is.
where it's like, oh, hackers have entered a perimeter, or well, what's the reality of that?
Yeah, that's absolutely the reality. Thanks for the clarification. That's helpful. I don't want to name names of tools just from confidentiality, but
Oh, yeah.
most of our tools do a lot of that work for us. We would never be staffed, have enough staff to watch every single possible attempt that's made to get in from the outside. I can tell you that when you're looking at the tool as it's scrolling through attack failed, it just goes up. It's just a never-ending stream log of attempts that go in. So we fortunately have good tools that, unless there's something that is going to alert us about something concerning, we pretty much can just trust that the tool is doing what it's needing to do. But it is constantly looking for attacks from the outside. We're also looking for attacks from within, and a lot of security issues that you hear about are from our internal jobs, or in something where somebody that already is a trusted employee of a company with credentials that are valid, they could do something that they should not be doing. So we have tools on the inside that are monitoring somebody. Maybe they're trying to email themselves some documents that's confidential, or they're in data that they shouldn't be taking from work, or data that they're sending to Google Drive or to Dropbox, or emailing it to themselves, as I mentioned. So we're spending just as much time on the inside monitoring activity to make sure the data doesn't get out, that it stays inside. Did that
Thank you.
answer your question, Zach?
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
Good. I hope I did. Good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anytime.
All right, thanks for the clarification. Sorry, I took it completely off course to AI. It's my fault.
Oh,
but
AI is a fun topic too. So
it is very, very big topic. There is a question from Forrest asking, if you can't answer it, it's
did we lose you?
Sorry, cut off for a second there. Is it
Yeah,
good?
I think we lost you for a second. Yeah.
All right, so asking about what type of software you use at 8451.
Software in general?
Yeah, so software, like program, the tools you use to conduct your work.
Broadly, within security or development space, or
Can you help clarify a little bit for us? I know you brought up Linux OS. Yeah, Linux with an X, my bad.
Yeah,
and
Linux.
a few other programs.
Yeah, operating systems we're mostly Windows, and then we also do run Linux. We utilize Linux probably more in our environments where we are looking for a little bit more security. In some areas where we have data that we have to be able to comply with HIPAA. Linux is a little bit more of a trusted operating system in that front, because we actually utilize a special Linux image that comes in pre-certified, and that it checks all the right boxes to ensure that, once we load data on there, we can be certain that it's secure and it's locked down and it's auditable, and all the little check boxes are taken care of for us, and there's a health check you can run afterwards to make sure it's still compliant with HIPAA. So we do tend to utilize Linux more for our systems where we have a little more confidential secure data. And then we use Windows for the majority of other servers that are in our environment. We run Hadoop, and we run Exadata for storing a lot of our pharmacy system data and a lot of our critical system stuff. And we utilize VMware for the majority of our servers. My background was at Kroger Technology, on the Windows side was VMware, so fantastic product. And being able to virtualize, spin up servers is like a lot of companies do, is definitely helpful to our business.
All right, thank you very much for sharing what 8051 does. Now I have a classic question for you: Apple or Android, and why?
Well, I have an Android, but I would say that when I had to take a look at the two, I would probably pick Apple. I think that for the most part, I think Apple is probably a little bit more secure. I remember being at a cybersecurity conference at NKU 5-6 years ago, and the head of the CIS department within NKU, the information security department, was talking. He had a flip phone, and he said he teaches Android security, and he said there's a reason I have a flip phone, and that was kind of almost that was really almost I had to hear at that point. And I wouldn't even go apples to apples just on the security standpoint, but I would just say that from an overall looking at the company, I think that there's too many things that are forced upon you with an Android and with Google. That's Apple. From what I see, that you don't see that as much. From an end user convenience standpoint, a lot of the things that I get on an Android from Google that really can't turn off, and they're always collecting information. And I think to a degree, I think that Apple makes it a little bit more user friendly, that it's not so many things forced down upon you. That's my opinion, of course. But I would say if I had to tip the scales, I would probably go more towards Apple as far as a more secure platform.
Thank you for your opinion on that. Oh, so we have another question from Zach asking, have you had to consider quantum computers as a threat in the real world? Can you also explain what a quantum computer is? Because that sounds interesting, but also dangerous.
Quantum, yeah, I've attended 1 hour-and-a-half long session on quantum computers. And to me, it's sort of like trying to describe molecular biology. There's a lot going on in quantum computers. There are millions of dollars, from my understanding, to run. They're not something you're going to just implement. I think that quantum computers are up and running in the world, and they're being utilized. We have not considered quantum computers. We don't have the size organization where it would be warranted. And I'm skating kind of lightly here because I don't want to reach into an area that I don't have a lot of background in. Just a 90-minute session and overview of quantum computing, but very complex. There's a lot going on there, kind of like blockchain, right? There's one of those things you just don't sit down and just do. So the size of our organization, that's not something we're going to run towards at this point, because we don't have that kind of a need, or that kind of a need for that kind of horsepower. But seeing it as a threat in the real world, I would say that the only threat would be lack of understanding. And it's a very complicated concept. And the only threat I could really see at this time would be just the lack of understanding of it, which could always tend to result in problems by those that are maybe utilizing it and don't fully understand it. Would be the only threat that I would see. Still there?
Yep. Sorry.
Okay.
Zoom crashed again. But
Technology.
yes, technology. Now, I do have a question here asking, what did you major in college?
Oh, that's a great question. So I graduated with a degree in English literature, focused on American Lit. So my aspirations post college were going to be to get a master's degree in English Lit and to teach at the college level. Um, so that's naturally I went into an IT field. Um, honestly, when my first job out of college, I was actually focusing on going towards a degree, further advancing my education in English and with a goal to teach. And I mentioned at the very top of the Q&A that, how do you get into cybersecurity? I lucked into IT, the right opportunity at the right time. I was working on my first job and happened to be one of those guys that it was right when IT was starting to actually become a little bit more of a well-known career. It was right for those that remember the early days of Windows, and it was Windows 3.1. It was the very first point-and-click operating system that Microsoft put out, and when that was implemented in our office, I was the guy that was trying to get into stuff and trying to figure out things and poke my way around. And that resulted in a very, very fortunate career change where they asked me to join their IT team. And from there, started to become very, very interested in IT at a very early in my career and was able to make a great career of it. Within 3 years, I decided I'm going to just kind of ditch the whole teaching thing and English Lit thing and make a career out of IT. But yeah, English Lit was my major in college.
That's actually pretty amazing that you made a switch from English to. It's amazing, actually.
English is one of those.
Apparently, there was a question you. Yeah.
English, I was going to say English. It's one of those things that you're always going to use. You're well spoken. You can write. People still come to me to this day asking me to proofread emails for them and make sure commas are in the right place. And so it's one of those things they can't go wrong with it. But and again, back when I was doing it, there wasn't much in terms of IT other than COBOL and kind of some of the mainframe, that type things. It wasn't as well distributed as it is today, as easily accessible as it is today. So I may have thought differently if I were going to school now. I think that would probably see more exposure to IT and definitely get into it at a much earlier age. We just didn't have it back in the 90s.
Fair enough. Sage also asks, if English Lit was your original plan, how did you make the switch over IT? I guess you explained it earlier when you were just invited to join the IT team. Right?
Yeah, I was just very fortunate that the manager of the IT team where I worked just saw, hey, this is someone that has an interest in it. And I think that speaks a lot. I think that, A, giving me a chance, but B, it's true. If when you find your career, you have to find an interest in it. People have probably heard the expression, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And that's absolutely true. And they happen to see someone that was at their company that was really kind of showing a lot of interest in technology and poking way around and expressing curiosity in it. And that was actually, they took that as a positive trait and asked me to join. And ever since then, it's been a career I've not even ever once turned around and questioned that decision. It was always knew it was the right choice.
I guess fate just really, really wanted you to be in data security.
I guess so.
Yeah. By the way, did you end up going back to college or any other institution to learn how to do data security or cybersecurity, or did you just completely let Jesus take the wheel and just have at it?
I think I took the wheel. I did not go back for formal education at the college level. Certainly, throughout the years, dedicated, specific training to different areas. When I was first in the infrastructure space, went to the week-long classes at which you had, the companies like Max and a lot of those where you're going deeper dive into Windows and deeper dive into different specific areas of expertise, but never went back to college to get a degree or a second degree or a master's or anything like that.
Thank you very much for saying. A lot of people might think it's a bit late to go back to school and have it. Oh, we had a question earlier. Sorry for it. Ask, what was a typical day at work like before COVID-19, and maybe how was it changed after COVID hit?
It's to this day, we're still experiencing it. Like a lot of companies, we're still remote. We're not back in our offices yet. So I think this is going to continue on for quite a lot longer. But my typical day before COVID hit, I work on more of the governance, the security governance side. So I work a lot with our third-party partners that we work with, and as a data analytics company, that's what we do. So there's a lot of companies that we work with where we have to exchange data. So my role, my job is on the data privacy side and vetting vendors. I work a lot with vendors on I still do on a day-to-day basis to, if we're going to work with you and we're going to exchange data with you, then we have to understand better how you run your security at your company. Are you going to be, when we provide this information to you, are you going to protect it with the same level of care and the same level of scrutiny that we do at our own place, at our own company to secure it? So I work a lot with those types of companies. We work a lot with our organization on day-to-day security awareness. We do phishing tests. We do with our employees, security awareness type things. Yeah, that's kind of a day-to-day type thing. A lot of meetings, like a lot of companies are in a lot of meetings. New projects that are coming up. Constantly, our business is coming. I'm working with our business where they'll raise questions to say, hey, we're looking at doing this project. This is how we want to utilize this data. Are you okay with this? Is there anything we need to consider? And so I do a lot of consulting with the different business groups within our area. Work a lot on the HIPAA and protected health information, making sure we're keeping that secure and making sure that we're doing all the right things there. And then a lot of partnering with Kroger with the data that they provide to us to use, that making sure that we're doing the right things, and we're looked at by Kroger as trusting us to making sure that we're doing the right things with the data.
All right. Now, I have a question here asking, are there any future trends in the general field of data science data security that you think are going to be on the rise?
Cloud is becoming more and more common, and understanding where your data is, and that includes cloud. More and more of our partners are utilizing cloud. Kroger and 8451 are branching out more and more into cloud with Microsoft, and it's just really making sure it's changing a lot of mindsets, where before having your data center and your data is there and you know where it is and it's always going to be here. And when you get to cloud, there's a lot more scrutiny and a lot more research and investigation has to go into where's your data. We have to make sure that with cloud, with Google, you could be the contents of your Google Drive folder. Some of it could be in the United States, some of it could be offshore, some of it could be in a different country, because they just are able to. This data could be a number of different data centers when you're in the cloud. The whole idea of cloud is shouldn't have to worry about it. It's going to be there, and it's there when you need it. But as companies start to explore cloud, there's a lot more focus that needs to happen to make sure that you know where your data is. And so I think some of the trends are going to be the way cloud is exploding, the way mobile is exploding. Phones are no longer used for even just for surfing Facebook and surfing the internet and surfing different things. It's, a lot of people use their phone. That is their device that they conduct business on. So focusing security on the mobile device and making sure that that's locked down and you're using it the way it was meant to be used and it's secure. All of those are things that I think are going to continue to evolve as trends within security. We're always going to have the day-to-day responsibilities, like I described earlier, about watching your perimeter and your defenses and making sure data is not leaving the organization. But the more we branch out into cloud, and it is the right decision for a lot of companies to utilize cloud, it's just going to become that much more of a priority to keep a focus on and make sure you have a good understanding about it.
All right, thank you so much. Oh, another question asking I'm sorry. Oh, there it is. Sorry. So it's asking what your future goal in your career is going to be. Like looking towards the future, what's your goal? Well, even because of the COVID-19, it's hard to pinpoint a specific goal at this point. But do you have like something you want to aim for?
I really want to get better at what I do. I've been at 8451 for a year. My goal is to have an even better understanding about what our organization does. I work very closely with a lot of the business and as well as pockets of Kroger, but continuing to grow my understanding about the business, because that first and foremost is a success. That's how you're successful, in my opinion, in IT, regardless of what it is, whether you're in development or programming or infrastructure or security. It's knowing your business and showing that you're a partner to the business. So continue to grow my skills there and continue to grow my skills in security. I would like to develop my understandings better about the tools that we use. Even in the architect level type of experience would be great. So there's a lot of stuff that I don't know. There's a lot of stuff. There's things that I feel like I'm good at, and there's a lot of areas I still have to develop and improve and grow in. And those are a few areas that I would like to see myself improving on in the future.
Thanks so much for sharing. We're coming to the end of our AMA session. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to give to any inspiring data scientists out there who might be graduating high school and looking for ways to do data science in college and beyond?
So data science, data security. Data is probably everyone has seen the graphic about, how data continues to grow and to grow. And every day, and every year, it just continues. The amount of data that's out in the world continues to grow. There's going to be much more of an importance on it. So if that's something that's from a career that's interesting to you, then that's a great career to pursue. There's so much, and it's like security too. Security is not going anywhere. That's not something that's going to one day just be gone. The more that we're getting into technology and cloud and data, the way it grows, it's also going to become more and more important to secure. So, so as far as advice, just follow that. But I would also say that when you go into college, the best part of your first year is figuring out what you want to do. Having a good idea about what you want to focus on to get you started, but to explore some of the other classes that you're going to take, because you'll never know. I mean, I mentioned I graduated with a degree in English. My first major I started off in was music, and then from music went to business, and business went to literature. So it was because of the classes that I took that you don't have to have it all figured out in your day one of your freshman year. It's good to be able to look at some of the classes that you're taking and become, maybe get inspired by a class you had no idea. So keep an open mind too, that you may decide to change, and that's okay. It's not going to slow you down, and you can certainly change up if you find something else that interests you.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, you're cutting out a bit, or am I cutting out?
You were cutting out a little bit, but maybe it was.
All right. I just say again, thank Matt for coming in. I want to thank everyone for coming in on a Friday of sorts to join. I would like to announce a few more events coming up in INTERalliance before this closes out. We have some TikToks that are happening on Wednesdays, but a little more technical. No, this past Wednesday we had talk about a
Hey Natalia.
We think we lost
Also have fun
Natalia.
challenges.
Hey, Natalia, I think your rain is interfering, but I think what Natalia is getting at is, first of all, we have a ton of opportunities that are available. This is Heather. Sorry, I just completely bombed the session. I got off my other meeting early. But we have a ton of opportunities throughout the week, from professional development to highly technical. So please engage with those as much as possible. I can't see the chat, so I don't know if she had one final question, but I'm going to go ahead and call it and say, Matt, thank you. The time that I was on, you have been absolutely incredible. For those of you who aren't in INTERalliance, as far as the Leadership Council, but Matt was voted this year's Mentor of the Year for the group, so a big hand for him there. But also, thank you from the bottom of our heart for being here today and for all of your wisdom and guidance.
Happy to do it. It was really great. I really appreciate being considered and being asked to do this. I would do this anytime. So it's a lot of fun. It was the highlight of my week.
Thank you. You're the best. And everyone, have a fantastic weekend. I hope your summers are kicking off in the best way possible. And join us again for the next couple of sessions. We'll talk to everyone soon.
Take care.